Right, Jaron Dan standing by. Here's Stephen Kenny addressing speculation last night about his job and whether the FAI need to publicly address his future.
I've clear communication with key people in the FAI, and they've been nothing but supportive. And I think it's irrelevant if someone writes something in the back of a newspaper or whatever, that, and then it becomes that's I can't get sidelined by that. I need to remain focused on the job in hand, because ultimately players, people have seen over the last week, they've seen some in the last few windows, some really talented players coming through. Yeah, the experienced players have shown them a brilliant attitude. Listen, the 97-minute goal in Portugal, which would have been, one of the great results, is our only defeat in 6 matches now, and but we haven't. We've been drawn too many. We need to start turning the draws into wins, and so that's. We've got the 2 games next month, and then we've got Portugal coming here, and Luxembourg. So we've got Azerbaijan and Qatar. So they're good games, and a lot of good things from the week, really, but just probably Serbia overall could have deserved to win tonight. They were exceptional, but we dug in, showed different type of qualities, and played a lot of good football as well, and had obviously 2 chances at the death to win it with Andrew's brilliant shot and Shane Duffy's header, but they were very good. I felt Serbia overall.
Stephen Kenny giving his reaction to the media last night. Dan MacDonald, Ger Gilroy, good morning, lads.
How are you?
Morning.
Dan, what's your feeling listening to Stephen there and looking at the game last night, and particularly taking the 3 games maybe in the round, as to the ongoing and never-ending debate as to whether Stephen Kenny's the right man or not?
I mean, it is the debate that never ends. I mean, I don't know. I think, my old take on it is, I think, do you get the extreme of reactions after every game? And of course, the thing about Saturday obviously was 72 hours after nearly beating Portugal with a pretty controlled performance, can you now suddenly declare that this regime is broken and everything is terrible? Of course not. But of course, can you watch last night and then sort of reach the view, well, this is proof that everything is wonderful? No, of course not. There has to be a sort of a degree of sort of happy middle ground sort of between it all. And in reality, my feeling after last night isn't madly dissimilar to what it would have been after Saturday, in the sense that this is still a work in progress. There's always a chance it was going to be that way. I think the fear, the most relevant thing about last night for me is that the team sort of, and the younger players in particular, did at least get to experience a bit of an exhilarating feeling at the Aviva, in the sense of, a late goal where it's not a case that the full-time story is that they've just suffered heartbreak, they've just lost a penalty shootout, they've just maybe had chances and didn't take them, that they got that sort of rush and that buzz of the sort of the crowd being with them and cheering them off. And now it's a case of, okay, let's see where that momentum takes them. And let's see if that's just a little a positive blip as such, in the sense, or let's see if actually that can actually infuse them with confidence, because this Kenny era and these games, it is a collective, and there's a massive focus from one game to the next, and there's a permanence around the results. Like the 1-1 against Serbia, whether deserved or not, and let's be honest, it wasn't deserved on the balance of play, but in a month's time, it just goes down as a 1-1 in Serbia, just in the same way as some of the earlier results in the 15-16 games. Ireland actually did play quite well in some of those games, missed chances, but it's sort of forgotten because they weren't particularly memorable games. So there's a halfway house between it all, and to me, the show goes on, but then the show wasn't going to stop. This is the important point to make. The rumours of his imminent demise just weren't they weren't in keeping with where things were actually is sitting. And there will be a judgment in time, and the last week just adds to that judgment.
Yeah. Jerry, you're not one for a halfway house. The battle for the soul of Irish football, as it was flagged up last night, a phrase familiar to you. What was your view on it last night? A step forward for those behind Stephen Kenny, or a battering?
Let me explain through the medium of one Twitter account. On Saturday evening, I got the following tweets: "New contract now for Kenny. Do it tonight." Cry laughing, cry laughing, cry laughing, cry laughing, sideways. Tongue stuck out, winky emoji. And then, "New contract, my arse. Media will spin this shit too." They were both directly added me by a guy called John Ryan, who this morning slides into my DM saying, "Apologies if my comment offended you on Saturday, Ger. Give him a new contract, and this time it's not a joke. Played very well. In Kenny we trust."
The battle is won, Ger. Is that what you're saying? That's it?
I mean, my work here is finished. I'm done. Look, I think everything that Dan said is 100% correct, right? There's no doubt that we are at the very start of a huge process, and it could go perilously wrong at any point. You know, we could have been hammered 5-1 by Portugal. We could have been hammered last night, but we weren't. And so every little bit, every little extra foothold that we gain, either through the quality of the young players that are coming through, or the quality of the coaching that becomes evident as time goes on, or the support of the crowd, or even the "In Kenny We Trust" banner, and even Johnny talking earlier on about the stand up for the boys in green with 15 minutes left to go. This is the building of something, right? And at any point, it can go horribly wrong. And in retrospect, we'll go, okay, well, that was the moment where it became clear that these weren't the right people to do this. But at the moment, it doesn't look like there's a credible alternative. It doesn't look like there's a way out of this, except for what the plan that the current management team has. And that's all we've said the whole way along. It's like, give the man the opportunity to do what he has to do, and what he wants to do, and what he's capable of doing. And if at that point he proves incapable of it, well, then move on and find somebody else to do it. But the structure of what he's trying to achieve is correct. We can't anymore rely on mediocre English journeymen to fluff out our team, because they won't want to play for us, first off. And secondly, what's the point of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure we've seen the end of the mediocre English journeyman, I have to say. That, I mean, particularly if you look at a position, if we get into the football conversation around it, and either of you jump in or this or Johnny, but the point that we've been discussing a bit earlier on about, like, looking at Jeff Hendrick last night, like, what in this country, right, when it and bear with me on this one, when it rains, I think this is an absolutely fine country to live in, no problem whatsoever. When the sun is out, I think it's time to get out of here. I'd love to live somewhere where this happens all the time, and I feel exactly the same about Jeff Hendrick watching him last night. If we had one position, Stephen Kenny and his coaching ticket must leave this camp going, if there was one position that we can improve things on, it must be that. Now, there's no ready replacement, but anybody go with that, or what's our feeling about how one position where we could potentially unlock even more out of, for example, the likes of Adam Ida?
I think we've been good at creating midfielders over the years. Someone will come through. We probably need to see, like, Malumbi needs more game time. He needs to needs more discipline. Like, he's very young as well. So I'm absolutely not writing him off. Jeff Hendrick's performance, like, it's fairly stereotypical Ireland performance, right? 1 week brilliant, in some games brilliant, in some games make some mistakes, but he's what we've got, and that's the joy of international football, is that these are the players. You got to dance with the one who brung you. So
like, is there a different way to play then, Ger? Is that maybe the right question for either of you? But is there a different way to play to, like, everybody's raving about Adam Ida, right? But, like, he's not going to be in that current role the guy who's going to score you a goal every other game. And in that context, who is?
A goal every other game, Adrian, would be absolutely sensational.
With that,
absolutely. That's to my point, 100%.
But they have, like, you do watch the game last night, and I'm fed up of watching Ireland games where, even against Georgia at home, games like that where we're basically outpassed. That shouldn't be the way. So you're pining for these young players to come through, and the likes of Gavin Kilkenny, he may step forward. Scott Parker seems to be putting a lot of faith in him. It's that midfield player that we really are badly missing. We've brought in obviously these players in the recent window that have had very little game time. Jamie McGrath, who was very, very tired last night but showed flashes. Josh Cullen, I thought, struggled last night. Brown didn't have a particularly good game by his standards. Hurahan is kind of only coming back in. Malumbi, for me, has struggled so far at this level, and obviously at club level is really desperate to get game time now. And I think I'd be interested in Dan's view on this, Dan, what midfielders are coming up, because it is the one area where, like, I think our goalkeepers and our centre backs and in general our defence, we have massive potential in terms of that foundation for a team going forward. But the problems for Ireland often start when we play it out from the back four, because the midfield isn't necessarily there to pick up the ball.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is, like, there are certain things around international football that you can control to a point. But I mean, Stephen Kenny's spoken about in the last couple of weeks that Ireland, for example, at the moment aren't blessed with wingers, aren't blessed with like attacking wingers really coming through the ranks. That's why he's putting a lot of stock on Ogbene, who's playing in League One with Rotherham, has had an exceptional start to the season. But because you don't have those wingers, I think in his view, it probably makes the system that's being employed at the moment more of an option in the longer run, because say the alternative to that sort of 3-4-3 is to say like a 4-2-3-1 that Kenny often would have played with Dundalk, say, but that does rely on sort of width, and they would have Daryl Horgan again, and there are wingers in the squad, but not necessarily maybe, you know, Premier League options. And I think midfield is sort of one of those areas where Ireland have a lot of players without, you know, you can use these terms, but like Ireland have a lot of midfielders, a glut of players who'd be like number 8s, I guess, you know, and they don't have that number 10, which I think is going to be a real issue in the games against Azerbaijan and Luxembourg, and as that has proved to be the case in those games where you're sort of hoping to dominate the ball and dominate the opposition, and they also don't have, say, that top class holding midfielder, the number 6, who can sort of receive the ball comfortably and turn and bring, you know, to get things going the other way. I mean, it's a sort of a gallows humour joke, but I mean, Rice and Grealish are exactly the two type of players that Ireland don't actually have. But I mean, you know, that's what happens. Like, if you know, we have to find a way to like produce our own players, and I'm always wary of like dropping in names into the mix, because if anything, I know Johnny, you'll reference guys are playing well in the 21s, and understandably so. But we've had that in the previous campaign when Kenny listing off under 21 players, assuming, well, we can't wait till they come through. And it's difficult. It's hard. Like, it's really hard when you get to senior football, and you can watch the under 21s, for example, last Friday play Bosnia, really encouraging, but they're basically playing in a training ground, you know, the game. There's a big difference from that to playing in front of 25,000 people. And indeed every week with their clubs now.
But we've probably never been at a better time, Dan, for like recent evidence of some of the players that were playing last night who've come through exactly that route. We weren't sure about them, and suddenly here they are.
Yeah, and as I said, the good thing about last night is that the best players, or some of the best players on the pitch, are the younger players, without a doubt. And they've been given opportunities over the last couple of months. I mean, the thing about the whole broader debate is that there can be a sort of it is, as someone said, it's a bit like Brexit or whatever you want to call it. Like, people will just sometimes hone in on the line of argument that suits their position and follow it steadfastly, no matter what the evidence suggests. So it's all about the result. The result is the bottom line. Don't mind me those stats or whatever. And then obviously Ireland got a lucky result. It's like, well, they were lucky. You know, the stats show they were lucky. Like, you have to sort of somehow try and find somewhere in between. But I think for me, like, this attempt now to suggest that any other manager would have played those younger players, I mean, that's just not true. Like, it's definitely not the case. I think it's very possible that other managers employed in the past who would be wary of putting young players into this position and throwing them in there, they probably last night would have had, with that personnel, might have had John Egan on the right of the back three, Kieran Clark in playing on the left. You know, like, I'm not so 100% sure you'd have Moba Badelli in there. You know, similarly with Gavin Bazunu, and I think something that has been vindicated is the faith in Bazunu. You know, there's a suggestion over the last week that some big issue was that Darren Randolph should have been in as the third choice goalkeeper. Now, I think really Randolph has been an amazing servant for Ireland, but I think the idea of going with Bazunu and Kelleher is clearly the right one. They are things that you can accept are positive changes where I think management can take some credit. The flip side is he's really putting his faith in some of the younger attacking players without necessarily having outstanding alternative options, but maybe on Saturday went too far that way in terms of Azerbaijan and didn't necessarily get the timing right. And there is something maybe in a way of Moba Badelli playing next to Shane Duffy and getting that sort of with Matt Doherty the other side, and integrating players with some of the older players around them and striking that balance right. And that's part of the, negotiating the roadmap forward in a way that you learn from it and progress together in a coherent way that delivers over the longer term.
Yeah. And Johnny, you were obviously at the game last night, and we have our poll running, and it seems like that culture war. It's 75% of our audience this morning are behind Stephen Kenny, and I think, in fact, it might have been phrased about giving him a new contract, which I'm sure is a bit of an alien concept to the other 27% who are saying that this thing has come to an end. And Johnny Jurr was talking about the atmosphere earlier on, but that's important, isn't it? Like that the 25,000 people leave there last night, they're buzzing. We could have scored a screamer from 35 yards out towards the end to, ridiculously snatch the game. But that should not be underestimated.
We were reading during the week about how the FAI is in crisis and is thinking about getting rid of Stephen Kenny because one of the big issues is that they don't have a sponsor at the moment, and it's £2.5 million. And what are they going to do? Where are they going to find the money? Well, I think everybody can get behind what they saw last night. And I think as Dan pointed out, the whole point about the sponsorship is because the previous era was very closely connected to the sponsor at the time, and things have moved on. We all know exactly what happened. The next sponsor who comes in is going to find an Ireland team that represents the best of what the future looks like. It's going to represent a team that is homegrown, that has come through the system, that understands what it's like to come through hardship and suffer, and is going to build on that. And you can already see in the last couple of weeks, the FAI are drip feeding out new deals or renewals of deals with big brands. And I would expect that there will be big announcements with big brands over the next coming weeks as well. Like, I think anybody, if you just step back and stop getting involved in the Brexit, he said, she said, they're wrong, we're wrong, you're attached to that guy, we're attached to this guy. Irish football has been in a state of crisis going back decades because of mismanagement. It looks like we have the underage structures, not perfect, but producing some players who are capable of playing a style of football that people want to watch. It's going to be a while before that group of players actually make it to the senior team. We're in that process at the moment, and we can either decide to follow the work that has been done, creating more technical players who are comfortable on the ball, or it seems we can exclusively focus on international results by hoofing the ball forward to the big man, creating pressure high up the pitch. I don't know if you were watching Clinton Morrison on TV last night, but you can talk well and good to play out well, but what the Irish crowd really love is somebody running down the channels and winning a throw-in. That's what gets the crowd going. We've been there, and it's not anymore. It really isn't. No one is going to pay 60 quid or 100 quid to go and watch Ireland hoof the ball down the channels, because the game and the world has moved on, and we all sit in our TVs watching the Champions League, and we want good quality football. I'm not saying Stephen Kenny's the only one to do that, but that's what we have at the moment.
I think that really is the nail on the head. Like, it's been portrayed so long in many senses as this League of Ireland versus like Premier League fans divide on Stephen Kenny, when like I want to cut some slack here for the like people who do not go to League of Ireland games, just namely the majority of football fans in this country. I think there are an awful lot of purists out there who might follow Liverpool, might follow Manchester United, might follow Spurs. And I speak to an awful lot of friends of mine who are not necessarily League of Ireland fans, who are so behind Stephen Kenny and are so positive, even last night, about the young players coming through, because they became bored of watching Ireland play like that. And some people, they want to go to their tournaments, they want to have the crack, they want us to win games playing whatever the best way possible. Most of the football fans in this country, whether they're League of Ireland fans or they make the occasional trip to England, or they might have a passing interest in what goes on in this country, they want to see good football. And I really felt that in the crowd last night. I was looking around to see, like, do I recognise any of these people from League of Ireland games? Who's at the game here? What's the age kind of profile? And there was just a really good feeling. Even when Ireland were passing the ball around at the back, often at their peril, there was very little in the way of hoof the ball. They really wanted to be behind this team, and I think most people in this country, as evinced by that poll, were probably just fed up with the way we were playing for the last while.
Johnny in the Stephen Ray with his little black book out. Dan, Damien Delaney was talking to Virgin Media last night about he said it was the worst performance of the Stephen Kenny era. That felt like a harsh oversimplification of things.
No, I mean Luxembourg was the worst. I think Luxembourg was bad. I think I vaguely recall Bulgaria last November being pretty bad. I wouldn't agree with that, but I mean, as I said, like, you can be broadly positive about where things might go, and also accept that it wasn't a great performance. I think they managed to come back off the ropes, and bizarrely, I mean, I did watch back sort of most of the second half last night. I mean, it's sort of hilarious if the shot at the end from Mo Ali had gone in. It would have been one of the greatest Irish goals of all time,
and a fully deserved win as well.
Like 30 seconds of passing, and as I pointed out, it reminded me a bit of, like, Ireland played Switzerland 2 years ago this month, with the Dave McGoldrick got that late header at the end. I mean, they were battered by Switzerland for large parts of that game, but it didn't matter because you get the rally, and in time it's just remembered as one of the good results that McCarthy got, or one of the decent results that he got. The details of the game fade into it, and this is the thing. Like, Ireland's campaign won't be judged by that game against Serbia because they got out with the result. It's the mistakes they've made in other games that is the issue. But just to sort of half revert to something Johnny was saying there, like, I was pretty high up in the press box last night, which put me way closer to sort of fans than would normally be the case in terms of being able to hear it. And there was, for all that there was like great support, it seemed, behind the goal and other areas of the ground, like, it was sort of interesting during the match that there was some unease from some people as well too. Like, there was some people who weren't madly happy. Like, even before the goal, if you go back to before the goal, the ball was played back to Bazunu, I think by Malumbi, and you can actually get some murmurs of like unhappiness, and there was some like frustration creeping in with people during the second half. It wasn't 100% unanimous in one direction. We're with this. You could hear the shouts of some people who were just thinking, I mean, they need to be more direct at times, and sometimes, that can be, the history can be rewritten by what happened. But like, I think there is something interesting in the broader debate where it stands. Like, I agree with Johnny that the labelling, it's not just like it's all League of Ireland fans one way, and it's not. But there is something in the broader debate that probably does act in Stephen Kenny's favour, and this is part of the real decision making process about where this goes and what shapes it. Is that, again, it's not 100% everyone the same way. There are people out there in grassroots and coaching world who probably are not that impressed with what they've seen. But I think that there's a lot more riding on this appointment than just necessarily the results in the short term. You're talking about an FAI that's trying to rebuild confidence after years of messing. Sorry, Gerard, I'll just say, and that there's a desire for this to work, and I think that the image portrayed by the FAI after 1 year letting someone go is not something that I think tallies with where they're going at the moment, and which is why I actually don't think Stephen Kenny is under the threat. And I'm pretty confident in this. I don't think he's under the threat that some people imagined, because there's a bigger picture to this situation, and it's not going to be shaped by the usual short-term noise around the international team that fades by the weekend. I think there's bigger considerations that would be used to judge this, and all the stuff about, getting the fans back into the stadium stuff, it's relevant, but it's actually not the driving force that's going to lead to the decisions that are made, and I think it's fanciful to portray it that way.
Ger, I think you're going to come in at that point. Just before you do, let me read you this quote here, because I'm interested to get your thoughts on it, from Eamon Dunphy in the Star this morning. Liam Brady's been asking the players if the players bought into the manager. I don't think he can ask that anymore. The fans back Kenny, the players back him. Now it's up to the FAI. Stop this nonsense of leaks that Kenny's job is on the line. The FAI have to back their man and do so publicly, because Kenny is the manager Irish football needs.
It's funny, on that point specifically, pre-game, Stewie Byrne was obviously off the ball last night, and he was saying that he had read the same programme notes that Johnny referenced earlier and hadn't seen the implicit or explicit backing of the manager, even though there is a long-term view, and this new strategy document is due out in the next 3 months, and it talks about a long-term view. And I think that tallies. It would be much better if they were explicit and came out and said, look, the noise is completely a waste of all of our time. We should be talking about what happened on the pitch, and we should be talking about the great grassroots initiatives we have. But I think the point from that Dan makes on a corporate level, the FAI can't sack this manager now, because it would be idiotic. It would be short term, shoot yourself in the foot. It's back to factional fighting, and it's back to having something that we have no control over, and we have no succession plan. Like, what they should be doing is saying, Stephen Kenny's going to be our manager for as long as he's successful. And after that, we're going to have a new manager who's going to come from within our ranks. And if you want to be the Ireland manager, you've got to be working with one of our underage teams. Fairly straightforward. It's what most football associations all around the world do. And it has this kind of immediate impact of going, okay, right, well, the underage teams are hugely important and they need to play in a similar style to the senior teams. I think, Dan, the other point that you made on Twitter during the week was about the texter into Off the Ball who called Stephen Kenny an amateur. And you made the point that this is the reason why so many people want Kenny to succeed. It's because if Kenny doesn't succeed, and if the result is that we look outside the Irish football industry for our next international manager, it's a massive knock on that whole industry. It kind of means that everybody's wasting their time. It kind of means that those grassroots coaches, that those coaches in the League of Ireland, that anybody who's working in the academy, that anybody's driving kids from Mayo to training in Dublin to see if they might be able to make it, like so many of the Irish players have come through that system, that you're wasting your time in those car journeys and watching those jerseys and thinking about what the lineup is going to be at that weekend. And we can't have that. We absolutely need a system that makes sense from the top to the bottom. Otherwise, the sport is completely screwed. It's in competition with the GAA. It's in competition with the Premier League. It's in competition with TV. It's in competition with the best computer games that we've ever seen. It's in competition with a million different things. And unless there is a coherent plan to get kids out playing football in a style that's going to make them successful and make the team look good, there's no plan. And getting in an English manager or an international manager is a short-term solution that has not worked over the last 2 decades. And that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, I think the point I made the other day about the texter is, again, this is possibly more relevant to the point of it's not just the case of the League of Ireland fans feel this way, but there are certainly, I've spoken to people, I suppose, younger League of Ireland managers and people coming up through the ranks who they really want Stephen to do well, because they would be aware that there would be large sections of the country which they live in who, as I said, don't think that they're involved in almost in real football. That there are these islands that exist, and there's international level which comes from England, and then there's people who work in the game here, and there's no link between the two. Now, of course, we know that all our best players will aspire to go away. Of course, all our best coaches, ambitious ones will too. But there's almost a sense, and I think this is where at the root of some of the sort of tensions that exist, that people probably get more entrenched in their views when they hear that some people, like people have decided from the start this isn't going to work because he's a League of Ireland manager and that's it. Like that's just that was it. And this assumption, well, because he is, I'm just going to conclude that the players don't respect him. Like that. I have nothing to bring to this debate. I have no knowledge to back this up. But clearly, with his background, players just don't respect him, and that's it. Which is actually a bit unfair to the players too, because most of our players now come from a slightly different background to even say the Brian Kerr dressing room, where he would have encountered maybe a team more so of recognisable Premier League stars, and might have suffered a couple of issues from a couple of players in that regard. I don't think Stephen Kenny, I think without a shadow of a doubt from everything I've heard, the players were open-minded to Stephen Kenny. Doesn't mean it works, but I don't think it's a case that they're sitting there going, well, who is this guy? What's his CV? But there are like a section of people out there who, until Stephen Kenny is successful, will keep making points like, well, he got sacked by Dunfermline 13 years ago. As though it's
wow, what a brilliant argument. Yeah.
I'm not, Maurizio Sarri got sacked by teams in lower league Italy on the way up the ranks. He was working on a bank at some stage. People have a different journey in coaching that isn't quite the straight line that you might have as a player. So it's just not relevant.
It's names as well, Dan. Like, do you think the players were? Do you think they were overly impressed by Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane, like throwing jerseys after 10 minutes before the kickoff?
But by the end, you can always find something that suits your argument, right? And there's no doubt that I think just by the end, the O'Neill thing, it worked for a while, but you saw, wasn't it? Matt Doherty wasn't, was dismissive enough of sort of the input of Roy Keane, for example. I think he got in trouble for that. But you have a window in which to impress the players, and then of course you'll be judged by the quality of the work on the training ground. And it does seem that certainly the summer camp, and again Anthony Barry and the staff and all that is very important. And these are all the elements of the setup. It's not it's not as straight line as is the manager inspiring them with the team talk. It's what the environment is like around the place. But what I would say is, though, like part of it is understandable to a degree. I may find some of the views offensive that are expressed, but like football exploded in this country. Really, as much as there was always a massive passion for football that was there, you could look through the history books. But it really like went out there in the golden era, at a time when the League of Ireland here was very, very part-time, not treated seriously from above. And we know this. We know that the presumption would be that we could continue to operate the way that we were going by relying on English football to do all the work for us. And for a lot of people, that's hardened and cemented a view of what football in this country represents and what it can strive to be. And for them, they don't view the League of Ireland on the same plane as football anywhere else in the world. They just assume, but the reality of where we're going is very different to that. I think that's the frustration that comes from maybe some people who realise you do not realise how important getting the league right is for where we're going in the future. And like, there's people, but the national team is box office. Like some people, high enough profile pundits, I'd never even heard of Jamie McGrath before. This is how the international team is very different.
And Ger's brought a point, Dan.
Yeah.
Like where he's like, we have all of these underage teams in the League of Ireland that have been brought in, and in fairness to the FAI, and it was during John Delaney's reign, they brought in the underage League of Ireland structures, which meant that you'd have all these young coaches. So as well as having, we'll say, Rory Higgins, who's come from the Ireland set of Stephen O'Donnell, who's played under Kenny at Dundalk, Stephen Bradley at Shamrock Rovers, we'll say Tim Clancy at Drogheda United, all these young managers. You've a scatter of underage managers who are starting at underage teams in the League of Ireland. You've all these coaches, a lot of whom are doing their badges with, top managers from England who are doing their badges with them. And there are a lot of ideas coming through in the League of Ireland that'll be different to Stephen Kenny's. There's a lot of an evolution going on in coaching in this country, and they're completely behind the ideas that the manager can come from this country, not somebody who's just thrown in from England and given a load of money to get us a result in the next game.
We're going to wrap it up, Dan. Go on briefly. I
was just going to say, I wouldn't necessarily agree with Jerry's sort of theory that the next manager just has to come from that setup. I don't think you can limit yourself to that too. You should always be open-minded to what's out there. You could have an ex sort of international doing really good things in the UK. There's a balance to be found between the two worlds. But I think it's more I think
an
it's
ideal
just
world.
crucial.
I mean, look, I'm not saying it's a strict rule, but in an ideal world, so John O'Shea is involved with the underage teams and the underage setups, and that's something he goes off. Somebody who has a connection.
No, I get that. I get that, but I guess the sense, though, I think the point is that, like, even when Jonathan Hill came in, there was a sense of, well, this new CEO is going to come in and change, and like, you kind of wonder, are people wishing this or knowing this? Probably more so to the former. He's going to change it, but like the optics of the English CEO coming in and saying we need to get rid of this guy and bring in our established manager from overseas, I don't think that's going to be a good look when there's absolutely zero guarantee of success. And that's why that line of thinking, as I've said, it's Delaney era FAI thinking, and I don't think that's going to reflect what will actually happen going forward, regardless of what the debates will rage on. I think he's going to get more time, Kenny, to be honest.
I think when we've Johnny Ward saying, starting a sentence with, in fairness to John Delaney, it's definitely time to wrap up this debate.
That's very harsh now.
Thanks a million.
You just showed me out totally out of context there.
Thanks a million. Plenty of comments coming into us, by the way, and we'll continue to bring those to you over the course of the morning. Right now, here's a bit of a sense of what's happening across the back pages for you this morning, including up on OTBSports.com on 9:15, or just gone it today. Kenny says that nothing but support. Kenny says FAI nothing but supportive as he shuts out noise over future. Also a 9 positive and negative article just up in the last couple of minutes in this international window for you to get your teeth into, and plenty more reaction from the Aviva Stadium last night as well. Here's what's happening across the back pages for you. Disturbed, says the Irish Star this morning, with a shot of John Egan and Shane Duffy, pretty spectacularly joyous after that.
If you are
jammiest of OGs,
like I am thinking, and I'm like one of these readers of the Irish Times who absolutely loves that article New to the Parish, where somebody comes in from Syria or wherever and says Irish people are really friendly, they're great, they've welcomed me, and you're just a great bunch of lads. I always think, like, what the opposition players feel when they leave Lansdowne Road. The Serbs must have been absolutely sick, because you're just looking at it and the place is going bananas. We haven't had a kick really for about 70 minutes.
Well, they leave it thinking that goalkeeper is that goalkeeper
He's
did it.
amazing.
That's what they've left. It was 10 shots to 2 on target, something like that. So
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that we've got 2, I was looking at the stats last night, was somewhat of a surprise to me. Harrington says that Leona is one of the greats, and no great surprise about that. That's written inside there. Magnificent Bazunu helps Ireland to a battling draw, by the way, and that's very much the tone of the coverage across the papers. This is the Mirror. Deserved our luck, and they've gone with the same pun there. Kenny Hope's fortunate point will give young stars belief for the future campaigns as playoff hope dies. Ron has first run out back at Red Devils. That's your man with the United gear on him. Elsewhere on the Irish papers, we have the Irish Daily Mail. Hope at last. Philip Quinn's thoughts inside. Kenny hails young guns as Ireland snatch draw. O'Dwyer to take on Cork as McCarthy era ends. This is Ronan O'Dwyer having left the Cork footballers, and Bobby O'Dwyer looks likely to come into that position there. Lots of All-Ireland build-up as well across all the papers this morning. The Irish Sun, justice is served. They're all going with that one. Late OG hands Kenny a result. Neil O'Riordan somewhat positive inside there. Chris up and running also there on that. The Herald, Burke, I want to be the Kildare boss. This is the news that Kildare are to appoint a consultant to find out who the replacement for Jack O'Connor is going to be after his announcement that he was leaving during the week. But Davy Burke, who's coming from Wicklow and has managed in the Kildare Championship, seems to be a hot favourite there. And making a point is the reflections on the football there. I might just grab a couple of these, Johnny, there. The Irish Independent, it's got on the front page a picture of the football last night of jubilant Shane Duffy, and then on the back, really the story of the night, Gavin Bazunu with save from his legs there, making a point there. Maguire Salam heroic set to inspire revival of Women's Irish Open. This is an exclusive from Brian Keogh inside, and that news from Colin Keys there that Kildare to appoint a consultant to find O'Connor successor as Burke declares interest. I'll leave you with the papers for now with the Irish Times, which is again a shot of the rough and tumble, I think it's fair enough to say, at the Aviva last night. John Egan, Shane Duffy and Collins, it looks like, in action there. Ireland show character to secure a memorable point, writes Gavin Cumiskey inside, and Mary Hannigan with the reflections as well from the TV and beyond. So that's what's happening there. You are watching OTB AM, brought to you by Gillette. Good mornings start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. It is 8:50 on this Wednesday morning, and a very good morning to you wherever it is you're at. We've loads of comments coming in reaction to the football last night, most of them somewhat supportive of what went on.